The wearing of helmets in battle is as old as war itself. During the trench fighting of the First World War, however, the introduction of steel helmets saved countless lives on the battlefields of France and Flanders. In summer 1914, 7 million men marched off to war, expecting a quick and glorious campaign. Hails of machine gun and rifle fire tore into advancing troops, while shrapnel shells from massed modern artillery, such as this French 75mm field gun, exploded overhead, showering soldiers in the open with lethal metal balls. By the end of the year, 1 million men lay dead. In this video, we will explore how steel helmets came to play such a vital role in protecting soldiers on the Western Front, examining the different designs adopted by 3 of the main fighting nations, on display in our First World War galleries and drawn from our wider collection. The battles of 1914 were a shocking introduction to modern warfare. In these early engagements, most soldiers had little to protect their heads. Many wore headdress made of fabric, like the British service dress cap or the French Kepi. Some troops did wear helmets, but these were little more than decoration and of little use in preventing shrapnel wounds. The German Pickelhaube, for example, was made of leather. The spike was intended to deflect sword blows from cavalry. This impressive-looking chromium-plated helmet was worn by a member of France's elite heavy cavalry, the Cuirassiers. But the design had changed little since the Napoleonic Wars 100 years previously, and it was too thin to protect the wearer from modern weaponry. Within a few months of the start of the war, soldiers began digging trenches to shield themselves. Artillery became the dominant weapon in trench warfare, firing high explosive shells which projected into the air deadly fragments of metal and debris, like wood splinters or pieces of rock and stone. Even the smallest of these could cause hideous wounds. Crucially, trench warfare saw a rapid increase in head injuries, many of them fatal and on a scale unknown in previous conflicts. The French army was the first to try and protect its soldiers from head wounds caused by shell fragments. From December 1914 to February the following year, it issued 200,000 small steel skull caps, like this one, to frontline soldiers. These calottes métalliques, or chevaliers, were worn under the soldier's cloth kepi. 0.5 millimetre thick, they were made in 3 sizes: small, medium and large. Holes were drilled in on either side so that they could be hung by a cord when not being used. But these skull caps proved only marginally successful in lowering the rate of head injuries. It was clear that something better was needed. The skull caps were the brainchild of French Quartermaster General Auguste Louis Adrian. He was responsible for design and production of all equipment issued to French troops. He now set about developing a new helmet for trench warfare, and in April 1915, the final design was approved by the French authorities. It went immediately into production. And this is it, the French M1915 Adrian, the first modern steel helmet. The Adrian consisted of 4 main pieces of steel: a shell, a visor, a neck guard and a crest, which were all welded or riveted together. On this one you can see the flaming grenade badge, worn mainly by infantry and cavalry. The Adrian came in 3 sizes, and there were also 3 sizes of lining. It was initially produced in shades of grey blue. The helmet was 0.7 millimetres thick and had a liner which made it comfortable to wear and absorbed shock if struck by a fragment or shrapnel ball. It weighed 0.765 kilograms. The Adrian helmet, with its distinctive crest, can trace its lineage back to the medieval Bourgogne. Its manufacture was not simple and involved over 70 processes. Yet by the end of 1915, so little more than 6 months after the design had been approved, some 3 million had been issued to French soldiers. And by the end of the following year, over double that number had been distributed, with many also being sold to other Allied armies, including those of Italy, Russia and Belgium. Most importantly, as the Adrian helmet became standard equipment, the French military noticed a marked decrease in the frequency and the severity of head injuries. The only major problem was that the helmets had a glossy finish which reflected sunlight, making soldiers wearing them easily visible to their enemies. From November 1915, canvas helmet covers were distributed, but it was found that if a soldier's helmet was struck and pierced by a shell fragment, then scraps of the cloth, which was often filthy, went into the wound. This caused infection, and so the wear of helmet covers was banned. For the same reason, soldiers were also prohibited from the common practice of covering the helmet with mud to dull the finish. By then, though, the French military had found that by simply firing the helmets for longer in the factory kilns, they developed a dull, matte finish. Those helmets issued before this discovery were repainted, either in base depots or at the front. The Adrian helmet here, which we can see has been brush painted, appears to be one such example. One admirer of the Adrian was Winston Churchill. For 5 months in 1916, he commanded an infantry battalion on the Western Front. A French general gave him an Adrian as a gift. Churchill wrote home to his wife that, "My steel helmet is the cause of much envy. I look most martial in it, like a Cromwellian. I always intend to wear it under fire, but chiefly for the appearance." But the British military establishment was not so impressed. It thought the French helmet was too flimsy and too complicated to manufacture. So in summer 1915, Britain's War Office began its own quest to design a shrapnel helmet. They were approached by a Latvian businessman who had settled in the UK, John Leopold Brodie, who submitted his patented design to the War Office in September 1915. And this is it, the Helmet Steel Mark I. It is better known as the Brodie helmet after its designer. You can see that it was shallower than the Adrian and resembled an inverted soup bowl. With its adjustable lining made of leather and treated cloth, it weighed around 1.1 kilograms. This particular helmet in our collection has a chain visor to protect the eyes from metal particles and debris. However, relatively few of these were made, and they were never popular among the troops. Crucially, the design meant the helmet could be cut from a single sheet of steel and then pressed to form the shape of the shell. This made the manufacturing process speedier and the helmet tougher. There were a couple of false starts in the design and construction of Brodie's helmet. The first variant, the Type A, was made of a mild steel. Just weeks after production began, the metallurgist Sir Robert Hadfield intervened. He proposed that the helmet be made of a stronger alloy, known as Hadfield steel. This incorporated 10 to 15% manganese and was much tougher and less brittle than standard steel. In September 1915, manufacture began of a new Type B helmet made from this alloy. It could stop a shrapnel ball travelling at a velocity of up to 750 feet per second. Later that month, the first of these shrapnel helmets were sent to France for field testing. There were few to go round, so they were worn by soldiers on sentry duty or patrols. When they were relieved by other units, they handed the helmets over to the troops replacing them. Those soldiers who did get to try out the Brodie helmet were impressed by its protective qualities, but complained that the edge of the rim was too sharp and caused injury. Also that the liner was too slippery and the paint finish too shiny. So the design was modified to incorporate a rolled edge to the rim and a new liner and chin strap assembly. Non-reflective textured paint was also applied to stop the helmets glinting in the light, although many soldiers would continue to wear specially manufactured cloth covers. In May 1916, the War Office approved these additional improvements. By July, and the beginning of the Battle of the Somme, 1 million had been issued. In September, Brodie's refined design was officially designated the Helmet Steel Mark I. Brodie's innovation was a lifesaver. It reduced head injuries by 75%, and tests showed that it was 50% more effective than the Adrian. As the Illustrated London News reported in November 1915, cases have occurred in which the wearers have been hit but saved by these helmets from what without them would have meant certain death. Even in cases of extreme risk, not only has death been avoided, but injuries have been confined to bruises or superficial wounds. By the end of the war in 1918, over 7.5 million Brodie helmets had been made for British and Commonwealth troops, as well as the American Expeditionary Forces. Most German soldiers continued to wear the Pickelhaube with a cloth cover into 1916, though an order went out in June 1915 that the spike be removed as it jutted above trenches. It was normally made of leather, but as the war went on and raw materials became more scarce, factories made Pickelhauben from other materials, such as very cheap steel or tin. The Pickelhaube did become a highly prized trophy among Allied troops in the front lines. Many men wanted to bring home souvenirs to show off to their families, and so they scavenged from the battlefield or even took them directly from German prisoners. There was even a trade in them, with frontline troops selling Pickelhauben to soldiers in the rear. These ones were taken on the Somme in 1916 by British troops. Despite the iconic style of the Pickelhaube, the German army needed greater protection against the deadly effects of shell fragments and shrapnel. The result was this, the German M1916 Stahlhelm. The birth of this design can be traced, like the Brodie, to summer 1915. It was a collaboration between Professor August Beer, a brain surgeon, and engineering professor Friedrich Schwert. Beer provided the German General Staff with a dossier which included the statistic that of 102 head wounds he had treated over 3 months, at least 3/4 were caused by shell fragments, many of them tiny. The Prussian War Ministry was suitably convinced, and so Schwert set about designing a helmet that would be light and strong, protected the head and neck, offered good all-round vision, and did not impede aiming of a rifle. It was made of chrome nickel steel, 1 mm thick. It had lugs on either side to provide ventilation. A steel front sniper plate, 5 mm thick, could be attached to the lugs in order to protect against bullets, but this idea was soon dropped as it was heavy and impractical. The Stahlhelm was issued in 6 sizes and so ranged in weight from 0.98 kilograms to 1.4 kilograms. A sample of the new protective headgear was issued to an assault battalion in December 1915. When they gave positive feedback, a further 30,000 helmets were distributed to assault troops at Verdun. By July 1916, 10 times that number had been issued. This example was recovered at Verdun and was tested by the British Army. Their interest was in how much protection it offered against small arms fire, which the helmet was not designed for, although they did find that it was not penetrated by bullets fired from long range. Just as with the British Brodie and French Adrian, a shiny paint finish reflected in the sun and gave away the wearer's position. To remedy this, cloth covers were first improvised in the field, then manufactured. The helmets were painted field grey, but in July 1918, the General Staff approved a disruptive lozenge pattern, like that normally applied to artillery pieces, with patches of 3 colours, green, yellow ochre and rust brown, separated by strips of black paint. The Stahlhelm was nicknamed the cooking pot or chamber pot by German soldiers. By the end of the First World War, 7.5 million M1916 helmets had been manufactured, and they were also supplied to the Austro-Hungarian, Bulgarian and Turkish armies. During the Great War, the steel helmets we have shown here became part of every soldier's equipment. Modified versions of each of them would be worn during a Second World War, just a generation later. With their distinctive shapes, the helmets also became enduring cultural icons and national symbols for the armies and their soldiers, the French poilu, the British Tommy, the German Lancer. For the public at home, and for the soldiers themselves, these steel helmets evoked their fighting spirit, grit and stoicism.